cancel culture is good for democracy. Well, that's the opinion of people who believe that freedom of speech only applies to particular points of view. Now, a new movement is underway to blacklist certain speech by labeling it disinformation. The goal is to convince companies to stop advertising on conservative websites. Well, Dale Hurd has the story.
Companies are being steered away from spending advertising dollars with conservative news websites by what's been labeled a stealth blacklisting operation. The British Global Disinformation Index says its mission is to disrupt the business model of disinformation. To reduce disinformation, we need to remove the financial incentive to create it. The index has the potential to economically strangle some conservative websites. Investigative reporter Gabe Kaminsky uncovered the operation for the Washington Examiner.
GDI compiles a secretive dynamic exclusion list, essentially a blacklist, of the websites that it determines to be the biggest purveyors of disinformation online.
The Global Disinformation Index lists the 10 riskiest websites for companies to advertise with. All are conservative or libertarian, including the New York Post, Reason, the Daily Wire, and the American Conservative. They're accused of things like lack of transparency, bias, or omissions of pertinent information. We asked the senior editor at the American Conservative, Rod Dreher, for his response to the claim his website is risky.
My response is, we are an opinion magazine. Of course we're biased. Liberal opinion magazines are biased too.
But no liberal or mainstream media websites are listed as risky by the index, which is funded by several foundations, including George Soros' Open Society Foundations, and even the U.S. government, through the National Endowment for Democracy. Or at least it was until members of Congress got wind and the funding was canceled. This is only the latest wave of cancel culture to hit conservatives, who have already been shadow banned, deplatformed, debanked, and even mentioned for deprogramming.
And the question is, how are we going to really almost deprogram these people?
As conservatives began to be banned from social media, they thought that at least they would be safe on their own websites. But the censors have followed. While Republicans in Congress are vowing to investigate the Global Disinformation Index, Dreher, the author of The Benedict Option, a strategy for Christians in a post-Christian nation, does not believe this censorship campaign will stop anytime soon.
Yeah, I don't think it ever will stop, because the other side, they're motivated by a religious fervor. They are fighting evil, and you can't tolerate evil. They have identified the enemy. The enemy are those who were so-called deplorables, including conservative Christians and others, who they will deem to be threats, and therefore they can be marginalized.
The recent issue of Rolling Stone magazine features an article called Why Cancel Culture is Good for Democracy. Stephen Sokup, author of The Dictatorship of Woke Capital, says corporate America is easy prey for programs like the Global Disinformation Index.
This is a continuation of a trend in American history of an elite ruling class that believes that they're, sort of the benevolent guardians who are taking care of the poor, stupid American people who don't understand what they really need and what they really want and what's really best for them.
In an attempt to fight back against corporate cancel culture, a conservative watchdog group called the 1792 Exchange recently released its corporate bias ratings. It rates more than 1,000 companies on their likelihood to cancel a contract or client or deny services based on a person's beliefs. And the future could see even more censorship. A Manhattan Institute study found that while the American public leans 2-to-1 in favor of free speech, most Americans under 30 favor censorship when free speech hurts certain groups.
Freedom of religion, freedom of association, all the First Amendment freedoms, they are overwhelmingly intolerant of these freedoms. They do not want to support free speech, freedom of religion, or anything like that if the exercise of those freedoms stands to hurt a vulnerable minority.
We invited the Global Disinformation Index to answer the charges made against it. but they did not respond. They're now being accused of spreading disinformation themselves for warning advertisers to blacklist news sites that blamed the COVID pandemic on a lab leak in China, a claim the FBI and the U.S. Department of Energy believe to be true. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Please watch this story going forward because this has been a tactic of the left in the United States for some time, where they try to target the funding for conservative news sites, for conservative opinion. They've actually bragged about it. And they've had individual targets in the past where particular hosts on conservative cable news were targeted and then removed because they threatened what's called the upfront advertising. Well, now they're going after everybody, and whether it's cable news or just somebody's blog, they're coming after you to say, well, we want to shut off any income that you would generate from advertising, and we're going to do it with this index. You have another group that's trying to say, well, you promote hate speech, and therefore you need to be censored. Please be on the lookout for that, because that needs to be a sign that they're actually against free speech. Opinion journalism has been around America for hundreds of years. It's nothing new. The muckraker journalists got us into the Spanish-American War. You look at these, and it's been around for a long time. And why would you ever try to throttle free speech? And if people can make it in the marketplace with their opinion, well, then more power to them. Go for it, because it's in the free exchange of ideas that we can actually approach this thing called truth. It's in that free and open debate that you let people decide. Now, because we're into this woke culture where companies seem to be trying to out-woke one another, we have to be very educated in how we get information. So please look at source documents. And I'll take on the right on this one too. If you look at the last election, take a look at the Dominion lawsuit documents that are currently being released and what people were actually saying in their emails, what they were saying in their depositions, and what their opinion was privately versus what their opinion was publicly, and what were they really worried about. Get informed, and the best way to get informed is to read the source document directly. That's been a cry of free speech all the way back to the Renaissance. It was a return to original documents. Don't listen to the opinion, don't listen to the translation. Go directly to the source, because when you see that, then you get real information.